Hello, Barr. Can you hear us okay?
Hi. Yeah, how's it going? That was a perfect segue. I'm sure it was
Jesse?
planned. Yeah.
Nothing
You
on
would
this show.
actually think it is, but it wasn't at all.
I love
Nothing on this show is planned, just so you know.
Fortunately.
Fortunately. So Bart, there's actually been a bunch of questions regarding data quality and data observability today. So perfect way for us to kind of chit chat on those things. Before we do that, tell us who you are, what do you do, and where do you join us from?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Barr. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Monte, Carlo. We're the data observability platform. A little bit about us. We were founded about 3 years ago. We're fortunate to be backed by some of the best investors in the world, including folks who invested in Snowflake, Looker, Segment, Datadog. And we count amazing folks as customers, including folks like Fox, CNN, JLR, Auth0, many others. Looking forward to chatting today about all things data quality. And I'm dialing right now from just north of San Francisco. So I'm in the Bay Area, California.
Okay. So it's still early morning for you. Speaking of early morning, Bell is our producer. Bell, is there a way I can get another coffee here? Just somebody to throw it at me? Thank you.
Please throw it at him.
We
I
need to
would
keep
actually
the
really
energy
like to see
levels
that
high
happen.
here. Yeah.
We have 6 hours left, so we need to pump it up.
I see.
Okay.
I had a cold brew, so I'm doing fine, Barr.
Nice. That's good. Energy drinks. Let's do it. Yeah.
Exactly. So Bart, we're going to talk about data quality, data observability, and data reliability. Let's talk data quality. Why should we care about data quality? First of all, what is it and why should we care about it?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I'm glad to hear that's come up multiple times earlier today. I heard it once. And I think, that's maybe one of the primary reasons, starting with the obvious, data is becoming huge and has been huge in the last decade or so, and is even more accelerating in the recent decade. And I have to say, even with the market volatility that we're seeing today, data is still front and center. Companies that we work with are doubling down on data. They're hiring data scientists, data engineers. They're making data even more at the forefront of their strategy. And that's something that we're seeing only accelerate. I think there's some, numbers behind that to back that up and to help give some context and texture to this. It's fun. We have, in-person conferences back now, so I can actually get to hang out with people and say hi. And you get to sense the sheer magnitude of the industry, right? If you're talking about companies like, BigQuery that have revenue of about 1.5 billion in 2021, or Snowflake that reported $1 billion as well for 2021, or Databricks with almost $1 billion, 800 million, and accelerating. That's unprecedented growth at those rates.
Yeah, and money talks, right? Like this is a big problem, and I think a lot of people are trying to solve it.
Exactly. So that's on the one hand, right? Like companies are investing a ton in data. Here's the other side of this. Companies are actually using data to drive really important decisions. Like we are seeing companies that use data to make decisions on financial loans and lending products, right? Where everyday consumers rely on that data to make a decision on whether they get a loan or not.
And that's a big topic right now, right? With the shifting market conditions.
Absolutely, exactly. Fintech is driven by data, more than ever. And even if you think about folks like JetBlue, a company that we work with, they actually run on data. They have a lot of data about whether your flight arrived or not, and at what time, and is it late, and what's your connection after that. And so, data really is sort of powering all of the products, and more so that we're working with. And these products rely on data that has to be accurate. We're just reaching a point in an evolution where, I think we would call ourselves data-driven a couple of years ago. And, it was sort of it was cute of us to call ourselves that. We weren't quite data-driven. Maybe we had a little bit of data.
It was a goal. It was
exactly,
a goal more than it was a reality. Yeah.
Exactly. But today we actually do have, data that's powering products. And, I think the change that I'm seeing, maybe 2-3 years ago, companies that were more in media, Fox, for example, I'll mention them, big AWS shop, cover events like the Super Bowl, like the elections, many other events. Also, invest a ton in data, run on very sophisticated data platform, world-class data platform. So, industries like media, retail, eCommerce, Fintech, InsurTech, those today are, very rich in data. But even more so, like companies are traditional or industries that are traditionally not data driven, more laggards in that instance, like B2B companies, for example. Even B2B companies today want to share data with their customers, want to report on, how are their customers using their products and share that back with their customers. So data sharing is becoming more important. And with all of those sort of examples where the accuracy of data is paramount, right? And so we can't really sort of like half-ass it anymore. We can't say, okay, maybe the data is right, maybe not. No, like that, the data has to be of high quality. And so I think, that's kind of the primary reason for why it's becoming so important to get the data right and to make sure that it's accurate and trusted.
And what does it mean to have high quality data? What is high quality data? How can you measure what's good quality data?
Yeah, like from a science perspective, because we throw that quality word around a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also different definitions of it, right? Like data quality, data observability, data governance. There's lots of buzzwords out there, so many of them. I think historically, the definition of data quality was really centered at sort of a stack that was more common, maybe 5-10 years ago. We were just ingested all of your data into one place. And you just needed to make sure that the data coming into that database or data warehouse was accurate. And so you wanted to make sure that the data is clean upon ingestion.
Yeah.
So we invested a lot in cleaning at that point. But in today's, I'll use another buzzword, modern data stack. The data has to be accurate throughout that, right? So you might have a data warehouse and a data lake or a data lake house, through your ETL, through your pipelines, through your BI, maybe your ML models. Data has to be accurate at any given point in time. Now, what does it actually mean to be accurate, to your point, Darko? We've actually come up with, or sort of fortunate to be pioneering this category called data observability. I'll explain a little bit about what data observability is.
That's the word we want to hear.
That's the word.
What is data observability?
So in order to explain it, it's actually quite simple. But in order to explain it, I'll use an analogy here for software engineering. In software engineering, any engineering team uses something like New Relic, AppDynamics, Splunk, the list is long, to make sure that their applications are up and running, right? We're making sure that we're live here, right? We're making sure that our products are up and running. We're making sure we have 5 nines of reliability of our application. What happens when the app is down? Everyone knows about it, right? And not happy about it. And there's been this whole, sort of framework emerge around in DevOps that helps software engineers make sure that their applications and infrastructure are reliable. What if we took those concepts and actually applied them to data?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what data observability is. Data observability is the organization's ability to fully understand and trust the health of the data in your system. And actually eliminate what we're calling data downtime, which is basically periods of time when data is inaccurate, missing, or otherwise erroneous. I'll give you kind of a classic example that I love. Netflix was down for 45 minutes in 2016. 45 minutes is a long time to be down. Their app was actually down because of duplicate data. And so in today's world, wrong data can actually cause application downtime. Data downtime and application downtime become the same thing. Crazy.
Yeah. Because like a lot of our applications in real time rely on data to do things. And if you have data downtime, your application can't access data unless you have some sort of a graceful degradation, you will struggle with it. So that is very important, to keep an eye out on that data.
Yes.
Now,
exactly.
Now, before you continue, Green G007 came back to us with a question they had in the begining. This is, I guess, a perfect question for you. What is the difference between data governance and data observability?
Great question. I think in general, there's just like this plethora of different topics that honestly vendors like to use. I think vendors like to call themselves, we're a data governance, data observability, or whatever it is term. And the reality is it actually doesn't quite matter the differences if we can articulate what is the pain that a customer or that a specific company feels. And so, much prefer to actually use that in simple terms to explain what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And so, I'll talk about the problem that data observability tries to solve. The problem that the data observability tries to solve is a problem where people are using data and the data is wrong. It could be wrong for a myriad of reasons. But the situation where, a customer or someone looks at a dashboard and the numbers are plain wrong, like you can tell, like it just doesn't make sense. Or for example, just completed a transaction and the data that you're looking at is wrong. Or the price of a particular item on the website is actually inaccurate, for example. Or, maybe for some reason, the data didn't even arrive, for example. Maybe, a third party data that you're relying on hasn't sent that information, and so the data is missing. And so data observability aims to try to solve the problem of data that's inaccurate, leading to lack of trust in the data, leading to lack of adoption of data. And data observability is an effort to help data teams actually operationalize trust in data. Now, when you take data governance, I think data governance, incorporates different kind of aspects in it, but by and large, I think it's the method of where companies actually try to manage their data in a better way. And that could be with the purposes of better data security, better data privacy, permissioning, access. There are lots of different aspects that can go into that. And traditionally, data governance, kind of teams were focused on a lot of those types of problems. But I really think, again, like going back to the purpose of the question, I think it's more important to ask, what problem are you trying to solve, right? Are you trying to, and that is probably going to help us get to a better solution.
Yeah. Now, it is very important to have these data observabilities. Like when I understand it right now, coming from a developer's perspective, right? Having the overview of the quality of your data, is it good at all times? So what are some primary elements of a strong approach to data observability? Like how would that work?
Yeah, and again, we can draw on your experience, Darko, from a developer.
Yes, please.
In DevOps, right? There's the idea of detection of problems, resolution of problems, and prevention of problems, right?
Okay.
And we have different methods and tools in order to address each of those. The idea in data observability is actually exactly those three steps. So detection of data problems, we believe the data team should be the first to know when data breaks. It's actually often the opposite, that data teams are the last to know about data breaks and about data breaking. And they might hear from someone saying, hey, way downstream, the data is wrong. And then starts this like finger pointing, blaming game of like whose fault it is. And why didn't you tell me that you changed that schema? Now all my reports are messed up. And hey, like that data didn't arrive. Is it like the ETL's fault? Is it like the data source fault? Like go figure out. And so the first around detection, like making sure the data teams are the first to know about it. The second is resolution. So being, reducing the time it takes to resolve data incidents from honestly sometimes months and weeks to actually hours and minutes. And then finally, prevention of these issues to begin with. So can we actually, maintain the velocity in how we build, but also increase the trust in the data that we have. And in order to do those things, we actually came up with these sort of 5 pillars of data observability. It's actually interesting, when sort of started this journey, people were like, hey, you're never going to find patterns in the data because the data breaks for different reasons. Like everyone's a snowflake and everyone's data breaks for different reasons. Actually, we challenged that and we came up with these 5 pillars based on speaking with hundreds of companies, asking them, why does your data break? What happens? What does it look like when it breaks? And what do you do about it? And those 5 pillars, very briefly, freshness, volume, schema, distribution, and lineage. If you sort of are able to automate the ability to understand those are sort of the foundation to a strong approach to data observability.
So, we talk about data observability here to kind of monitor the data so it doesn't go bad, right? It doesn't break. So
yeah.
In what ways can we break data, right? What are common issues to be on the lookout, especially when doing things at scale and scaling things like data pipelines?
Yeah, for sure. So there's different, ways in which data might break, if you will. The first most common is actually like miscommunication between teams. So if a team might, anticipate, I'm like, hey, I expect this data to arrive at 6 a.m. every morning and it should be accurate.
Right.
What if you actually create a contract around that kind of expectation, contract between teams, and actually set like baseline of SLAs and SLOs, service level agreements, for your data in particular. So a great example of this, Brandon Beidel, he's the head of data at Red Ventures, a digital media company, has actually like architected a full kind of like set baselines of SLAs and SLOs in order to make sure that there's a line on expectations of like, when should this data arrive? What should it look like when it arrives? And actually like certify the data.
See, that's really cool, because I talk to a lot of customers who have problems specifically with dealing with different organizations and cross-organizational communication about data, right? And they're getting it in a format that really isn't friendly to them in their applications. They have to go through all these steps, to modify the data, and it can be a bit of a hassle. So having that already pre-architected and really having that interface between teams is like great for productivity.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy how, with the explosion of data, there's just more and more people with their hands in data, right?
Yeah.
I think before it was like, there's 3 people who like know everything about the data. And now there's like 30 different teams and they all have different titles and like, go figure out who's responsible for what, right? So I think that, that's, oh, go ahead.
So my question, I want to step back here for a second and hug my fellow developers and ask you a question. So when we are starting to do stuff with a lot of data, so we notice that our company or the project we're building is going to have just a ton of data, and we're going to rely on it like crazy. So what are some of the key steps or key mindsets we need to have in our heads about data quality and data observability? What are some practical things we need to go and look for? Like, okay, that could be some open source tools or some products, some frameworks or whatever. Anything you can kind of tell to us, developers, data engineers, how do we get started with this?
Yeah, for sure. I'll use an example just to make it a little bit more concrete, and then I'll explain in more detail these 5 pillars, because I think that's where I'd suggest actually starting. Okay. So the particular example, actually, I'll tell a little bit more about JetBlue, which hopefully you all know is like international airline. And JetBlue data team basically manages all the company's data, from things like bookings to support tickets to flight times. And actually, prior to taking this holistic approach to data observability, they actually went to extraordinary lengths to actually fix issues at all times of the day, including weekends and holidays, with a very manual approach. And this is probably what most developers are doing today. There's actually JetBlue in particular had a team called Eyes on Glass team that basically manually refresh the dashboards to make sure that everything is smooth. And that is honestly just the reality for most companies in the industry today. They have teams that are manually looking at dashboards. And honestly, that doesn't really make sense, especially when you have a team that's relying on important data that we talked about, or even a complex data structure, right? So JetBlue is an example. They're actually one of the biggest, if not the biggest, DBT instance in particular. They have thousands of models. And so with both DBT and Snowflake, there's a ton of data and a ton of value that they could see. It basically exploded, but there's also so many users. And so to your point earlier, there's so many different teams coordinating about the data. And there's also, reports that, just couldn't tolerate any errors. And so in those cases, actually they implemented data observability as sort of a best practice, and actually use that to make sure, for example, if there's a bug in a particular DBT model, and that bug actually causes some downstream table to truncate, then they actually get an alert with what specific problem happened in that table, what was a particular DBT model that's associated with it, and then what are the downstream dependencies that might be impacted as a result of that table being corrupted. So it's a combination of having, in this instance, detectors on volume of data, understanding of the DBT model, as well as lineage in this particular, to help infer what are the downstream dependencies and users that rely on that particular data, so you can fix that problem before the stakeholder is even aware.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And also there's a great question in the chat from Molly. Molly is asking, not us, but you, chat, what data tools or technologies are you planning to invest in this year, or you as a developer, what data tool technology are you planning to use? So check it out there as well. Make sure to tell us, and we would love to get your comments and feedbacks on that one. No, excellent. So we talked about data pipelines and like workflows and these things. How do you think teams should think about integrating these quality checks into these pipelines, right? So I guess we want to make sure that the quality of the data is high, and that how would we implement those things? How should you think about that?
Yeah, great question. So I think, going back to the theme that we talked a little bit earlier, I think historically there's sort of two different ways that folks took. One was actually not incorporating any checks or not incorporating any coverage, and just looking at the end result and looking at it manually, right? And basically looking at sort of the data products and saying, hey, like does data look right here? And sometimes you have like a sixth sense and you can be like, hey, this is up or down. The other way that folks historically have done this is just making sure that upon ingestion, the data is accurate, right? There's a lot of kind of different solutions to do that. I think the difference is that today in particular, there actually is a need to drive sort of end-to-end coverage. And so having, data observability monitoring or data monitoring in your data warehouse and data lake, through your ETL and your BI, like in every different point of the stack is actually really important. Similarly to how, you kind of would monitor your applications or infrastructure at any given part of the stack. And so having this end-to-end approach is really important. I think the other kind of big focus is, and I alluded to this, the focus on automation, right? And so in the past, what folks would do is like specify, in the example that we talked about before, I expect this data to arrive at a certain hour, or, I want this, I need to make sure that like this table in particular gets updated 2 times an hour, right? It's actually quite tedious to do that and to define that for every single table. And so by using machine learning or by using automation, you can actually deploy it in an automated way. So, companies that have hundreds of thousands of tables, you could, with observability, actually automatically monitor the freshness of that data across the data warehouse without any manual input. So you could actually say, okay, this table gets updated 2 times an hour every single day. This specific table gets updated once a day, except for weekends. And basically like learn the different patterns with machine learning, learn the different patterns, learn the different models, and actually like try to forecast or predict when the next update will be. And if that is violated, alert or let the team know, right? And you can do that with metadata and different information about like how often the table gets updated. And so introducing new ways to actually like automatically track that. I'll give another example. I'll talk about schema changes. Actually, schema changes is one of the biggest culprit of data going wrong. And so oftentimes a team might
say.
Yeah.
We've never
happened to you. Never happened. Yeah, exactly.
Nope, not me. I'm too good for that.
Exactly. And so, if I'm looking to make a change to a particular field, like in terms of its type, or to actually maybe I just want to delete a particular field. Maybe in deleting that field and downstream, there's someone who's like actually relying on that field, and I'm going to like mess up their entire dashboard, the entire reports. By me actually being able to proactively check what are the downstream dependencies of making that change, actually introducing like a healthier way to work. I can also deploy faster, make changes faster. So those are kind of particular examples of how to actually apply it systematically and to do it differently. And again, would encourage thinking about those 5 pillars. So freshness is like timeliness of the data, as the data arrived on time. Volume, right, is the volume of the data actually like as expected or as it was historically. The third is schema changes that we talked about. The fourth is distribution. So that's really at the field level. So there are particular fields where you, for example, let's say, if I have like shoe sizes and, suddenly I get like a shoe size that's like 30, that doesn't make sense, right? So automatically learning on that. Or for example, if I have like a field that's a credit card number, and then suddenly I have like a letter in that field, that looks weird, right? And so looking at things at the field level automatically. And then the 5th pillar is lineage, which I talked about, both table level and field level lineage, and one that's not just in one place, not just in your data warehouse. It has to be across your data warehouse in your BI as well. So you can say, hey, like this table that broke upstream in the warehouse, are there any dependencies in the BI? Maybe no one's looking at it. Maybe no one's using it. or maybe, you're using it every single day. And so you actually have to make sure that that data is accurate.
Right.
So these are some really, really practical things. I think, teams are working on implementing a variety of levels from each of those, kind of 5 pillars, but having a strong automated end-to-end approach to those is really how we see folks integrate.
Yeah, that's really good food for thought, Barr. Question for you from the chat. Ricardo asks, is it better to start with data at rest or data in motion when thinking about these things?
Great question. It depends a little bit, in terms of like how you define that and what your particular stack is. I'm curious, like, there's a particular sort of challenge, that you're referring to, or particular a particular problem that you're trying to solve. Would be curious to learn more. Feel free to reach out. But generally, obviously at rest, checking with particular, if there's data that kind of arrives late, or that arrives, impartial or truncated. Those are some of the examples that I talked about before. Probably easier to start out with, but would love to learn a little bit more about that question.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Ricardo is a colleague of mine. So
oh, cool.
These colleagues come straight from people who like to talk about data and observability a lot.
Never happened to him. Yeah. Ricardo too. Never experienced that data, it sounds.
Exactly. So I'm sure that is very important. Okay, Barr, thank you so much. One question. I'm not going to ask you about a feature to an AWS service, but one question to you as a person who cares about data and data quality and data observability. If you step back 5 years and talk to younger Barr, what advice would you give yourself when it comes to these things?
Oh, great question. Advice when it's related to sort of data quality and observability in particular. I would say get started on it. You don't know what's going to hit you.
Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
Just do it. Like the clock is ticking. There's like coming ahead, there's a big wave of data downtime coming, and so get started on it. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Absolutely, and again, all of us in the cloud, in the world of modern applications, use some sort of data. We use data for a lot of things, not just to store something. We use to make decisions. Our applications, the quality of our applications, ultimately the quality of services we offer to the end user relies on that data. So as the quality of your code, as the observability on top of your code needs to be top notch, you need to do the same thing for data. Good, thank you so much. Barr, any last thoughts, any calls to action so we can send the wonderful audience somewhere?
I think you nailed it. You're only as good as the quality of your data. That's it. Yeah, I would just say, feel free to reach out. Always happy to chat about data. My name is Barr Moses. You can find me on LinkedIn, or barr@montecarlodata.com. Would be curious to hear more about folks' challenges with data downtime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Barr. Thank you very much.
Hey there! Thanks for checking out this video. Remember to give it a like and share with your community. Then hit subscribe and the bell for all the latest content that will help you build on AWS.